Cheers, queers! On today's Big Gay Agenda, we are talking with Sofia Hultquist from the talented Drum and Lace. Sofia is a music composer in the film industry and has worked on many projects, including the new Red, White, and Royal Blue movie. Welcome to the podcast, Sofia.
Of course, thanks for having me. This is very exciting to get to talk to both of you.
Oh, we are so excited to talk to you too. By the way, the soundtrack for Red, White, and Royal Blue is like the most beautiful looking thing I've ever seen. It's so pretty.
You mean the vinyl or like
yes.
the cover? Yeah. The vinyl is going to be really good, and there might be another surprise. I don't know if
Ooh.
You know what? I'm going to say it because I think the fans deserve to know. So. But yeah, the vinyl is beautiful, and a lot of people have been asking, it is the Union Jack on the other side, because the photo only shows the American flag on one side, but obviously the other side has the Union Jack.
That is so amazing. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, they did a good job. I just approved things. I wish I could take any credit for that. Yeah.
But it must be nice to have like the tangible, like...
You know, I haven't seen it in person yet. I'm hoping to get it before the general public, but I have a feeling that I'll just be receiving it when everyone else does, which I think is in December. At least that's what it says on Amazon when you order it. So not too much longer. Hopefully fans will still be excited for it. I think so.
I'm sure they will be.
Perfect holiday present.
Yes. Oh, I wonder if that's why they did it. That is perfect.
That is good.
And I couldn't believe the other day I saw there's like a full Amazon store. And I was like, I can't believe they haven't said, there's like socks and t-shirts. And I was like, well, first of all, I was like, wow. Second of all, I was like, why haven't they sent me any of it? I'm like kind of offended. Where are my red, white, and royal blue socks? Poured blood, sweat, and tears into this movie. No, I really did. Well, I did, but not, it wasn't a struggle. It was a wonderful experience. But yeah, I was like, I want my socks. Where are my socks?
Yeah, I mean, anything that comes out, you have a right to, right?
I mean, that's what you'd think, but
yeah. All right, but before we jump too much into, because we obviously want to talk to you about that specific project, for listeners at home that may not be familiar with your specific profession, what is a music composer, and how did you get started in the entertainment industry?
So what I do is essentially I write music for film, television, all sorts of media, anything that's sort of music to picture. And I really fell into it while going to music college. So I got into college in Boston, and I'm originally Italian. I don't sound like it, but so, I went all the way from Italy to Boston, to Berklee College of Music. And originally I wanted to be a performer. And I think it was one of those syndromes of like, I was like the big fish in my small kind of city. And I got to Berklee, and of course there were like, people that were just so talented, like such talented singers, such talented. And I just kind of realized that I just didn't have what it took to like do it professionally. So I was looking around at the majors, and I was like, well, I love film, and and it was one of those clear, like, I'd never thought about that as a career because it wasn't as, like, commonplace. And also it's like, so many career choices you only decide to do when you have a role model. And there just, like, really wasn't anyone but, like, white men scoring movies. So I was like, well, I never even thought about this. So I kind of started doing that. And then all of a sudden I had a degree in film scoring. And it took a while. I did a bit of a detour away from it because I didn't, at the time, want to move to LA and was completely kind of like against all of that. But I'd say maybe in like 2016, so it's like 8 years ago, kind of like went back into it and started scoring documentaries. And now, it feels like a kind of overnight thing, but it's taken years and years. And I love what I do. I get to work on a lot of great TV shows and movies, also write my own music. So it's a really great form of art that I'm very glad to have fallen into, I have to say.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
What does your process for composing for film and TV entail?
It's always a little bit different. So there's been times when I've been brought on when they haven't shot the film yet or the TV show, and it's just at a script phase. And at that point, I'm meeting with the director or the showrunner and sort of like writing music based on like a feeling and based on our conversations. And then adapting those themes that we kind of wrote beforehand once there's picture. That's one way that it's been done. Another time, it's like I get brought in when they start to edit, once they shot the movie, and then, you know, in the case of Red, White, and Royal Blue too, they already had like a first cut. So when I got hired, they'd already put together the first assembly cut, which I think notoriously is the one that Matthew's been mentioning on, you know, online, that was like 3 hours long, you know, the first assembly cut or whatever. And to be honest, and I don't know if this is public knowledge, I don't think it's like a bad thing, but I was actually replacing a composer. So the previous composer had been let go. So they were already kind of deep in the process. And I got brought on in December. But as everyone who's been following the movie, they shot last summer. So, you know, like I was kind of like came in towards the end of the process. But yeah, so usually like once I'm brought on, I'm either sent a script or the movie, and then, you know, the hardest part is the getting started, because you just kind of sit at your computer with like a blank session in, you know, the music software that I use, and there's a couple that people use, and you just kind of start writing and you just hope for the best. And every time that you get started, it's like, you're like, can I do this? You know, every time you have to like psych you be like, come on, because it's like learning to ride a bike all over again every time. But then the moment that you get on, you're like, oh, I know what I'm doing. But at the beginning, you're like, it's terrifying. And there's nothing better than like once you turn that corner and you're like, the director likes it and everyone's kind of on board. And that's like the best feeling when you're kind of like at the beginning of like being in it. And yeah, and then you just keep writing and then record, and, you know, it's for me, it's like very like seamless, and it's like, you know, but I'm sure people that don't do this profession probably have 1,000 questions about it. Yeah.
I just feel like I couldn't imagine just like sitting there and be like, okay, well, I don't even know one note to what to put in there.
Yeah, I mean, with Red, White, and Royal Blue specifically, I felt it was extra challenging because people already loved these characters so much that it was like, how do you do justice by these characters? And like, people already love them so much, and then they both come with such like a strong background, you know, whether it's like family background, like diverse backgrounds, and it's like, how do you combine it so that their themes can work together? And that's something that Matthew and I talked to at the very beginning about how they have to have sort of like separate themes, but then they have to have theme together. And I think like what I sold him on was like, you know, it'd be cool if then their two themes can actually play at the same time and work together, which ultimately happens. And for example, like the last cue of the movie called We Won, like at the very end, and other bits. So it's like their themes are written to be essentially played by two people on the piano at the same time, just so that it could represent them like separately and then coming together. So these are like, you know, those really big considerations, which like when you sit down at the beginning and you're like, all right, let's write themes for these like highly beloved characters. But the feedback from everyone has been extraordinary. And I see how much people are listening to the soundtrack on Spotify. So I think it worked out.
Oh, it definitely did.
Yeah.
I have a question though, since you brought up the piano scores. In like the source material, since like this is a project that came with like a book and then got a film adaptation, just a bunch of source material. Like music is a big part in the book, particularly with Henry, who likes to play the piano. Did that factor in at all with like your instrument choice when scoring this?
1,000%. Yeah. I mean, that's why Henry's instrument really is pianos. And there's actually, I feel like maybe I know, and it might not be like super obvious, but there's actually a couple different types of pianos being used in the Henry themes and in the Henry cues. Like, for example, when he's with Alex and, you know, he says, or else I'll vanish right before they go to Paris. That's actually like two different pianos playing in different octaves. And ultimately, like, I don't know how it ended up happening, but Alex's instrument is essentially the guitar. And I think it was like a way to pay heritage to, you know, like to pay heritage, but also because he's more like contemporary. And I feel like it was an instrument that worked well with more of like a plucky sound. But yeah, music is a huge, I mean, the music supervisors did such a good job. And I know that people are disappointed because, you know, London Boy isn't in it and Elton John isn't in it. But like, trust me, the amount of work that they did for like even just the New Year's scene was so many songs.
Yes.
That like, I feel like you guys should have a music supervisor on because their job is crazy, having to like deal with artists and negotiating. I mean, it's wild. So, but it was hard because the score had to work with the songs, right? So it had to be like kind of classically inclined enough to like feel like a big romantic score, but also contemporary enough to stand up to all the amazing songs that are in it. But yeah, music's really, I've come to learn even more so important seeing Casey's playlists as well that they've shared since the movie's been out.
That's awesome. Thank you for the recommendation for a music supervisor. We're always looking for new people and jobs to interview, so
Yeah.
we can like showcase people working on these films, but also let the audience know how much work goes into these movies, because it's so much more than you think.
Literally talk to Maggie and Kristen, who music supervised Red, White, and Royal Blue. I'm sure they'd be thrilled to chat about it. And Maggie specifically does so many movies, Maggie Phillips. So,
Kaitlynn left us. She went to go get Maggie.
yeah, she's writing things down. She's getting it done. Oh, that's interesting that it would have just cut off. Can you imagine if she can still hear us and you're like, hello?
She might be able to, actually.
Oh!
Could you hear us, Kaitlynn? Oh, you actually got kicked out.
I kicked myself out.
We thought you went to go get Maggie.
I was trying to write down Maggie and who?
Maggie and Kristen. I can follow up with their names, but if you go on IMDb and you look up, you should find their contacts and everything too.
Yeah, that's an excellent. Do you? And so I assume like, because like in my brain, like composing and the music supervising are obviously different roles. Do you guys collaborate at all with I guess the pieces of music you're working on for a project, or is it more
it's pretty separate in that the only time that there's like an intersection is if, for example, if they're working on it with an artist on an original song, for example, like this didn't happen in Red, White, and Royal Blue, but like if I'd have to, you know, if they wanted some parts of the score to be part of like what Vagabond was doing, then that's where the music supervisor would have brought us in together. I mean, it's more just having like somebody in your corner, and the two of them, you know, they're the ones who brought me onto this project because I worked with Maggie. I think I worked with both of them, or maybe it was just Maggie on a movie called Rosalind.
Oh yeah, I've heard
that was up on Hulu, right? But then was part of the bunch of movies that Disney took down for tax reasons or whatever. Let's just not even go there because it's But yeah, the music supervisors just have this like really big power just because they can kind of talk to the producers and directors and just kind of recommend people that they've worked with that they know will work, that will do a good job. So, but yeah, there's not too much intersection. I've never worked on a project where the music supervisor has like necessarily given notes unless the director feels so inexperienced where they need help. On Dickinson, we did work with the music supervisor more often, just because I don't know if you guys ever watched that show.
We have questions about it.
We do.
Yeah, I mean, I had given the actually stupid question for me to ask. But
no.
On that, you know, there's like in season 3, there's a sing along, and there's just like so that, and then I think it's also in season 3 the Billy Eichner jazz thing. So there was a lot more. There was a lot more kind of communication with DeVoe Yates, who's the music supervisor on that. But music supervisors generally are just awesome people.
You have composed so many amazing things, and there's a lot of instruments in it. How many instruments do you play, and which is your favorite?
So first and foremost, I'm a vocalist. So I use a lot of vocals in most of the scores that I do. And even in scores where you don't hear me like singing, you know, laws and oohs and whatever, there's still sort of like vocals used as pads. And this is the case in Red, White, and Royal Blues, where you never really hear vocals in like the way that you hear in Dickinson, for example. But it's still there. And I think we are so like attuned to the human voice since it's our mode of communication that I think adding layers of vocals just innately like adds kind of like a organic and like a connection to listeners. At least that's my theory. But I do that, and then a lot of the work that as composers that we do kind of like originates on a keyboard, just because a lot of the instruments that we're playing are like virtual instruments, so they're in the computer. So I'm an okay piano player. I'd say I can like hold my own, but I'm definitely not like, if you put like a Mozart piece in front of me, it's not like I can sight read it. But I do enough to do this. I'm an awful guitar player. I will say that. And I am married to a guitar player, so it's kind of like stopped caring about that altogether. And honestly, the other thing that I guess I'm like decent at is just percussive stuff. I mean, with a name like Drum and Lace, I kind of have to be, right? So the percussion and just, I guess it's an instrument, but I'm pretty good at like synthesis and like synthesizers and anything that's kind of like electronic based. But I wish I played more. Like I wish I'd played like the saxophone or the trumpet, like something a little bit more like that. And I definitely don't play any strings, which is something that I think I'm going to push on my daughter so that then she can help. But we'll see. I mean, I think with what I play, it's enough to then be able to hire friends and other musicians to then play those instruments that I can't. And as much as it would be great to be like a somebody that can play all instruments, it does actually foster more collaboration to bring in other people. And I think as artists are always so precious about doing everything themselves, but there really is something in like building a community of people that can because then it's just more people to uplift a project, right? So for example, in this latest movie with Red, White, and Royal Blue, I worked with the London Contemporary Orchestra, who I'd worked with on a bunch of stuff in the past, and they're just this incredible ensemble that has played anything from like Phantom Thread to things for Herdis or Hildur Gudnadottir. I can never say the name, but she's like one of the only women to have ever won an Oscar, and I don't know, they just do a lot of really cool stuff. But yeah, so I think the fact that I can't play as many as I wish actually is a good thing in the long run. Now that I can afford to pay people to do so, I guess.
That's true. Then you get different artists kind of like collaborating, like you said. Does that lead to any kind of like workshopping when you're trying to like put the piece together, or do you come with like the final piece to the collaborators?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a little bit of both. I think that for a lot of things, for other movies, like I have a horror movie that came out in July called Cobweb, and for that one, I had my friend Ro. They're an incredible cello player. I had them do a session beforehand where we recorded like some string effects and just kind of things in different keys. And then from there, I was able to take what we recorded and sampled it throughout the score. And then at the very end, once the score was approved, I did a remote recording in Macedonia with like a 40-piece ensemble. But like by then, everything was like approved and done. Because it's just, if you're a huge composer, then you can afford to just do these interim sort of like string sessions and then change things. But like at the level that I'm at, it's like you want to be sure that everything is just like done. But I love bringing people into the process early, because at least it's like it helps establish kind of like the sound of the film in a way. And so I've done that a lot. I feel like Red, White, and Royal Blue, I didn't really have much time to just kind of like experiment. It was kind of like a let's go thing, which is why also like the piano was a great thing that I could definitely do myself. And then any guitar that was too complicated for me to play, then I actually had my husband, who's a guitar player, play those parts. So I was able to keep it kind of like in the household, which is kind of nice.
So how does music impact a scene?
Oh my goodness. I think in the career that I do, the way I tend to think about it is that if you're watching a movie or you're watching something and the music sticks out, then it's not working. It has to like, whereas if you watch a scene and you're like, oh, that was so beautiful, then like all the elements come together, then it's doing the right thing. I think that a lot of the biggest thing that Hollywood doesn't do is that I think sometimes there needs to be more silence. I do think that there's like an overuse of music, and I think sometimes it's actually to the detriment of what you're watching. And it's something I'm very conscious of, but then it's a really hard thing to bring up because as somebody who writes music as a job, you saying, I think this doesn't need music comes off as like you trying to get out of like writing stuff. And it's like, it's never that. It's just like sometimes the scene just doesn't need music. But I think it depends. I mean, I think it can just kind of like elevate a scene so much. And I think that that's sort of like what being a film composer entails. You know, you're like trying to essentially amplify and reflect the vision of the director or showrunner, and you're trying to do it in a way that feels true to them, true to kind of like everything. And oftentimes, and I think this is why like a lot of times, you know, artists get hired to score, but then it's like it doesn't work out. And I think it's because people that are just artists are so used to being able to be like, this is my thing, I'm going to do what works for me. Whereas like with film composing, it's a very humbling experience. It's like, you know, I can write something that I think is like the best thing in the world, but if it's not serving picture, then it's useless. You know, if the showrunner or director who have been living in this script and in this world don't like it, then like I need to just check my ego and do something that works for the picture, even if it's not like my favorite piece of music. So I think that that's sort of also shows how important music is, where it's like it can really, if it's the wrong music, it can kind of just like ruin a really important moment, I think.
Yeah, I definitely, I agree with what you're saying about the overuse of music. Like sometimes I almost feel like less is more in order to really get that impact that like as the audience member like sweeps you into the scene. Because music, when it's done correctly, can really just like transport you into that moment with those characters. And there's nothing like it when that like clicks correctly.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and Red, White, and Royal Blue really did that. Especially like I feel like the romantic element of it, like the music really helps like elevate and enhance that like as a watcher. And you forget you're watching a movie sometimes. It's so well done.
There's a lot of parts in Red, White, and Royal Blue where it was really hard to especially like sneak music in slowly, like without giving anything away. And I mean, I'm assuming anyone who's watching this has hopefully seen the movie and this isn't like a crazy spoiler, but like the Q first kiss, like the way it comes in is like so quiet. And I think actually in the final mix, they might have taken away, because there used to be like these pads that kind of led into it. And I think they might have like either muted them or made them so quiet. So like you kind of just hear piano notes come in. Mm-hmm. But it's like something like that. It's so delicate and you have to be so careful, because it's like if you come in too strong, then like you're misleading, or I don't know. So it's a very delicate balance with stuff. But you know, I'm trying to think if there's any other, I mean, In Good Hands, you know, like the first time they make love, like have sex, make love. That one was also, that's definitely the music that went through the most revisions. And I think it's probably the scene that went through the most revisions, because I think it was very important to Matthew, obviously, to portray that in a way that felt authentic and not sensationalist, and actually felt like, I mean, I think it ended up more tasteful than hetero sex that you see on screen. I think it's so passionate and beautiful and tastefully done, and the music had to be the same. So I think, and every time the cut changed, the music had to change. But I think we might have gone to version like 7 of that cue by the time we recorded it. Which, you know, for big superhero movies, they get to versions like 20, whatever. But for the work that I did with this, I think we usually got to like version 3 or 4 on things. But this one definitely was the most. But, you know, like bad music there would have ruined it, right?
Yeah.
An electric guitar comes in.
No. Yeah. I understand the guitar is very Alex, but like at that moment.
Yeah, not really. And it's funny, in that particular scene, we opted not really for piano. At one point there's a harp, and it was actually Matthew's idea, because he was like, you know, it's an in-between of like a piano and a guitar, where it's like a plucked instrument, but it's still considered like a keys. So it was kind of like, and that was like, Matthew had a lot of these like little things where like once in a while I'd turn around and be like, like that's a really, and I think he's really music attuned, but then he kept acting like he wasn't. but then he'd call me out on things that I was like, you clearly know music more than you're letting on. And I still wonder if it's a test. I don't know. It's Matthew, you never know. It might be, but yeah.
Definitely passed the tense.
Yes, you pass with flying colors.
Yes.
Oh,
with
good.
rainbow colors.
Yes.
You keep talking about pads in music, and I just wanted to ask what you mean by that.
Yes, actually, I can see how that would not be an easy thing. So, pads are essentially in music are anything that has like sustained chords, or anything that kind of sounds like it's just kind of like a sustaining kind of like pillow to everything. So a lot of the times what you play on a synth, if you're holding down notes and it's just kind of like playing something that it's literally like a pillow to music, I feel like. I'm trying to think of a place where it's like very obvious, maybe in the movie that there's but yeah, it's essentially just like held notes that have like a longer resonance than like a piano, you know, because like a piano, the sound dies out quickly, whereas with the pad, it's like usually held out and it's used a lot, you know, it's a synthesizer type kind of sound. And you can achieve it with other instruments, but it's usually like more of like a digital instrument term.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so we kind of mentioned this a little bit, and you brought it up too, that you have worked on Dickinson also, which was one of our favorite shows. I'm glad you brought it up organically. And we wanted to know, what was your experience like working on that show?
Oh my God, I wish Dickinson could go on forever. It was just such...
So do we.
Honestly, I mean, I really respect Elena for... Like, even from when we got hired, it was always going to be 3 seasons. It was always going to be, you know, like the introduction and then essentially like the Sioux season and then the Civil War season. It was always going to be that. And it's like, when you're starting on it, you're like, oh, we have 2 more seasons, like whatever, it's fine. But then by the last one, I swear I cannot watch the last episode. I cannot hear the last 2 cues of the 3rd episode without crying. Like, thinking about it makes me cry. Like, it was such a beautiful experience, and I feel like it's such an underrated show. And I think Apple it's incredible that they made it. But at the same time, I think they weren't expecting it to be as big of a hit, maybe, or, and I think when people see it in the way it was marketed just like as a comedy, just because, you know, especially season 1 has like a lot of slapsticky comedy, because I think the filmmakers and even musically, I think everyone was trying to find their footing, which, you know, I think in season 2 really works. And then season 3, I think is just like everything just clicks together. But I think it was just kind of marketed as like something for teenagers to like 20-year-olds. But instead it's like, I think it's just a show for everyone. And it's just so beautiful. Anytime that we saw an episode, it was just like the costuming, the scenery, the acting. I mean, I don't know. And it was just the most wonderful experience. And I wish that every project was a Dickinson. And I wish that every fan base was a Dickinson fan base. And I just love the fact that Dickinson fans, like the show Dickinson fans, like made Emily Dickinson's like poems end up in like the New York Times bestseller. Because like with Red, White, and Royal Blue, it's like it was already kind of in there. But for Emily Dickinson poems to be back and like people are like, but you know, it was just... And, I mean, Elena's brilliant. We're both, our birthdays are 1 day apart, so we're both, like, super Aquariuses. And I feel like the first time we met, we both, like, looked at each other, and I was like, when's your birthday? And we, like, totally guessed it. So we're Aquarius sisters, and I don't know, I mean, I could just keep going about all the things I love about it. And musically, I think with my husband Ian, we were just able to, like, really create the sound that wouldn't have been possible without the visual and the idea of doing music that was contemporary for them. And I think the reason why it works so well is just like Emily's way of thinking was so, you know, so ahead of her time. And I still feel like the kind of openness and the kind of like open mind that her character and like Emily Dickinson must have had is just like, just so ageless and timeless and beyond anything. So I love that we were able to bring a bit of like a punk influence into her, because essentially punk is all about, you know, transgression and And that's, I mean, more than anything, it's like with the title, with the theme, the main theme, that's, I think, where it personifies. It's the most Emily thing, I think, is the main titles of Dickinson. I like to think.
I feel like music was even more important in that show. Like, it was more prevalent. You
Mm-hmm.
noticed it more, but like it made it even better.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
I
that one
love
was
that
super
show.
thematic. I mean, the
Yeah.
you know, the Meet Me in the Orchard, like arpeggiated thing that, like, I feel like anytime people heard it, all of a sudden it was like, you know, this was like a Sue and Emily moment. Or there's this one cue that we use in every season, but I think it was only on the first season soundtrack, called Railroad Fever. And it's kind of like a vocal Hocket thing. And it's when they take the railroad to go out to see Thoreau in the woods. And I think it's season one. John Mulaney out
Yeah.
in the
He's in
cabin.
season 1. Yeah.
But that cue, it's like one of those that in retrospect, I get people emailing being like, I like the version from season 2. Where is it? And I was like, well, I didn't put it out. But no, I mean, it was, I think what it did too for just like LGBTQ visibility overall. And a lot of the things that I work on have kind of like this like desire to want to like tell these diverse stories, which I think is also why I love what I get to do, because I get to, like, you know, whether it's Dickinson, Red, White, and Road Blue, they slash them, which, you know, is not like the greatest slasher movie of all time, but I think the intention behind it was really great. And yeah, but yeah, I could talk hours just about Dickinson stuff. But did you have any like specific questions or anything?
You kind of answered one, but I guess kind of branching off. So like you mentioned that the punk influence for Dickinson, and to like a person who has never seen the show, that seems odd given like Dickinson was like a period piece from like the 1700s.
Right.
And so in a typical I guess period piece, since that one was more like contemporary mix, does the time period influence how you would compose, like what instrument you might use, or like I guess style of composition, like normally?
Yeah, normally you would. And I feel like I got to do that in Rosalind, which was also like a period piece. But then with that, what ultimately ended up happening is kind of like creating this, what was kind of coined by everyone as like Renaissance pop. So like all of the cover songs that were done for that movie used actual Renaissance instruments. So like harpsichord, these very specific like different types of flute, the harp. So it's like in that one, it was very important to maintain that like sound. That still was like a Renaissance kind of like sound. Whereas in Dickinson, it was kind of like anytime we tried to go down the route of making it kind of like period appropriate, it was like kind of rejected. So I think it was very intentionally not supposed to be that at all, which I appreciated because it was fun to experiment. And I think the three biggest influences at the beginning of season 1 for Dickinson was Missy Elliott, The Prodigy, and Phoenix. So those were like the three bands, artists that kind of like shaped a little bit of like the spectrum of the musical thing. And I think like my vocal added to it then ended up becoming like a huge part of the score, obviously. You know, as like Emily's externalized like feelings and stuff like that.
I love that. That sounds
Yeah.
so fun to be able to like play with like those, I guess, two sides of like time periods and artists. That's so
Yeah.
fun.
That's why I wish every project was like Dickinson. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just like it's so nice when you work on a project and you feel appreciated. And I mean, I've been lucky that 99% of the projects that I've worked on, I've felt appreciated and not like I was being told exactly what to do. And I think it's also just the kind of music that I do. But when it starts to happen, or when it's like there's like very specific studios and production companies that kind of like are notorious for micromanaging music, and you're just like, I don't know if I want to work with you again. And you're just like, that's not fun.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
You've worked on so many successful projects. I mean, again, we've been geeking out over Dickinson and Red, White, and Royal Blue. But of all the pieces you've composed, which one are you most proud of?
Funny enough, I mean, I'm proud of everything that I've worked on. I think it's like pride in different ways. Like, I think that the score that I can't believe that I kind of like pulled off that is in the direction of what I would like to do is for the horror movie Cobweb. Just because it's like, it uses string effects and it uses a huge ensemble, and it's so dark. And I think the music for that I describe kind of like as a dark fairy tale. But you know, the genre isn't for everyone. So then it's like, it's very specific music. But in terms of like my favorite score right now, I would maybe have to say that one. In terms of like its effect on people and just like the way that it makes me feel listening back to it, I do think it might be Dickinson season 3. Just because there's like so many pieces in that anytime I think about it, it's just so powerful, you know, the way that the storytelling works. Trying to think if there's other shows. I mean, I love what we did for Good Girls because I thought it was really quirky and weird. But that show was so heavy with needle drops and with songs that it didn't really allow for more than like, honestly, like maybe 10 minutes of score at most per episode. Which, you know, was totally the showrunner's choice, and I respect it. But and you know, that one too, we were supposed to have more seasons, and then they couldn't negotiate with the actors, and then the pandemic, and then it kind of like just fell apart. But yeah, I think it's always sort of like the newest project is the one that you're the most proud of because you're pushing yourself to a bigger step every time. But yeah, I would say Cobweb and Dickinson season 3 might be my favorites. And then there's also a movie called Summering, which I really like the score, but it's a completely different vibe. I don't know if you guys have heard the music or the movie's okay. It did okay. I loved it. Yeah, it did okay. But the score is like kind of like ambient end of summer vibes. So very appropriate for right now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think we just need to do a marathon of all of your work and then just
for
hear
real.
the difference from each project.
Yeah, I mean, all of them are very different. Even Dickinson and Rosalind have a lot of similarities, but then the fact that Rosalind has like a string ensemble and has these instruments, it's all like you can see the through line, but then they're all very different. I do think Red, White, and Royal Blue is the most sort of like traditional of the scores that I've done, just because like the way that the harmonies and the way that the melodies work together had to be something that was like relatable to more people, just because the scope of, I think, the book and of the project is just so much bigger. You know, the more niche the project, the more weird you can get, because you're like, well, this demographic that this movie is for is going to like this. But for Red, White, and Royal Blue, where the ages are, I mean, it's rated R, but really I would call it like 14, 15 to, 99, 103, since Iris Apfel is 102. So like just whatever, like the whole, so when you're doing that, it just has to appeal, like, theoretically, like the music just needs to appeal to more people, which is why, like, I think it's the more traditional of scores. But it's fun to have gone to do that too, because then it's like you get to work on like beautiful sweeping pieces, like the museum score, which is my personal favorite, and I guess it's Matthews's favorite too, because when we were trying to decide which track to kind of like push to Spotify, that's the one that I think we both decided on. But yeah, so they're all different. They're all different babies.
And they're babies to be proud of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Sophia, it has been an absolute delight getting to know you better and just to hear about all of your amazing projects. We now have a new Spotify list to like listen to after this is over. Thank you very much. But before we sign off, do you have any final words for the listeners at home?
I mean, right now with everything that's happening in Hollywood, with the writer strike, actor strike, I don't know. I think it's really important for people to support filmmaking and to still go and like watch movies. And I don't know. I feel like I hope things come back soon. I don't necessarily have any tips. I just have like, I stand in solidarity with the actors and the writers, and hope that the future of filmmaking can be fair for everyone. including composers. And I don't know, I think there's so much great cinema that's still left to be made, and so many voices that still haven't been heard. And I think we're just at the beginning of allowing, and not even allowing, but like just being okay with anyone's perspective to be heard in film and everything. But and yeah, if anyone, if you have any follow-up questions, if anyone ever needs to get in touch with me, I'm pretty accessible on social media. So that's what I usually try to tell people, if anyone has any pressing questions about stuff.
Yes, please go follow Sofia on all the social media things. And if for some reason you haven't watched or listened to the Red, White, and Royal Blue soundtrack, Rosalind, Dickinson, all of them, please go check them out. We definitely will be doing that after this. So thank you to everybody listening. Thank you again, Sofia. Until next time, everybody, hydrate for lesbian Jesus and gay it up all over the place. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
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 And with that, we've been Big Gay Energy. If you like this episode, check out all our other episodes right here on YouTube. Please like, leave a comment below, and subscribe for more amazing, super gay content.
If you'd like to support us, check out our merch store, or join our Patreon for early access to episodes, exclusive content, and so much more.